Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And Tyson, before we get into it, I said it on our last NFL episode. Our 150th subscriber on YouTube is getting sent $50 on Amazon. So share the show, subscribe for sure, and just let it be known that this is a podcast that you like and share it with your friends. So I'm just going to say that off the top. We'll tell you some more details at the end, but I do want to say that off the top here, Tyson. But we have our college football episode right now because last week, this week, so not not a lot to discuss here.
It's bad. This is one of the worst slate, like probably the worst slate of the entire year. We're running through trying to figure out content that we can talk about for week 3, and you have to get really be a sicko to be like amped up for some of these.
Yeah, not a lot of stuff going on here. So Tyson, let's just get into the week 2 recap because there weren't a lot of big games last week either, and we discussed it a little bit. Well, I guess I did on the last episode. Just kind of going through some of the big games and some of the ones I was interested in. But I do think we had a lot of turnover and a lot of things that happened at the top that I think people need to understand. And the big one here is Texas, right? Like everybody was wondering, is Texas back? Like Sam Ellinger voiced, we're back. And they went into Tuscaloosa and showed maybe they are back. So we'll throw it to you. What did you think? Is Texas back, or is this just a bad Bama team? Like, what was your thought process as you watched this game?
So I think both things are true, right? I mean, Texas is now, or should at least be, cakewalking into at least the Big 12 champions. If not, hopefully a college football playoff appearance for Texas faithful. They look pretty good to me. There wasn't like a moment in the game. Quinn Ewers throwing moon balls and like Xavier Worthy doing Xavier Worthy thing. There was nothing that was like, oh, I didn't know Texas could do that, right? It was just kind of like they went in there and played their football game and came out on top because this is the worst Alabama team that we've seen in quite some time. And, we kind of shooted on Joe Milroe a little bit before the season started. And I don't want to like keep piling on, but the way this Alabama offense has evolved since like the A.J. McCarron days, like we're going to run it 45 times down your throat, and now they're running spread and everything. And you just go back to a quarterback who really can't do a lot of that stuff. It's going to make things tough. It's impressive to go into Tuscaloosa and get a win. I think at the end of the season, this is going to carry less weight than it does right now, but damn, it's got to feel good for Sark.
Oh, it has to feel so good for Sark. And then, like, when you talk about Ewers, like, this is a guy who reshaped what his body looks like in the offseason for Texas.
And his haircut.
He got his haircut, right. Want to take it more seriously, cut off his mullet, got in shape, got rid of some of that baby fat he was rocking with. Because one of the things, too, is, Arch Manning's sitting behind him. And although he's a true freshman, like, whoa, that whole thing. So Ewers comes in and I thought looked really good in this game. 24 of 38, 349, 3 touchdowns, and 89.4 QBR. But Tyson, he pushed the ball down the field, 9.2 on average every time he completed the ball. 114 receiving yards for Jatavian Sanders. Like, is he going to be their guy? We thought it was going to be Xavier Worthy. And it looks like this Jatavian Sanders kid might actually be their number one there, which is pretty crazy. But I think to your point about Alabama, like Jalen Milroe, we know he's an absolute stud athlete. Like that, like the dude is a freak athlete, probably the fastest guy on this team, I think is what they say. So when you run like the spread look, it's different type of spread than when you've had a Jalen Hurts, a Tua, even Mac Jones, and then obviously Bryce Young last year, because they were more accurate. Like you could allow your elite weapons to run across the field in wide open space, and then these quarterbacks would be able to hit them. Like that's not the case with what Milroe's working with. One, the receivers aren't good enough compared to what they've been working with, and two, he's not accurate. Like he's this classic dual threat guy, like a really good athlete who can kind of throw it sometimes. And that's just not good enough anymore, especially when you're playing a Texas or when you have to go and play a Georgia or an LSU like Alabama's had to play the last couple of seasons.
Bama's defense looks slower to me. Maybe I don't want to say like worse prepared, but there was moments like Coed McKinstry got a lot of love on the broadcast for closing in on a throw. I think it led to a Texas field goal as third down. He didn't touch the ball. It was just a flat drop by the wide receiver out there kind of in the flat. But in years past, like that's an interception, that's a sack. That's something else. And Kool-Aid's he's their best player, and he's really good. But it doesn't look like there's no monster with Alabama this season. I'm not saying going forward that can't be true. There's so many ridiculously talented kids on that roster that maybe by the end of the year there'll be somebody where we're like, hey man, he's going to win the Heisman next year. But like in college football, when the boogeyman is the head coach, it's a little harder to maintain that kind of stranglehold on kids' psyches because let's face it, and I understand it sounds ridiculous, but these 18-year-olds that are coming into college now, they know Bama as the second place team in the SEC, right? Like when they're coming of age, this is a team that is in the college football playoff and loses the national championship. Like their earliest college football memory might be Tua finding Devontae Smith down the sideline, which is awesome. That was also like a while ago, right? And so we're sitting here like, oh, it's Alabama. They're going to figure things out. These kids don't give a shit, man. Like it's fun to go in there and beat Bama because it's Alabama. I don't think there was a period of time where it was like you walk in there, you see Nick Saban on that sideline, and your whole team was dead already. It feels like there's a little bit of push. Like you can feel them a little bit when you poke their belly these days, which is not typical of an Alabama team. But I don't want to say they were soft because they weren't. But like you can't get out physical by Texas.
I think they were undisciplined too, which is something that you don't see from a Nick Saban coach team, right? Like you rarely see the undisciplined, the penalties, the things like that, like broken coverages, letting up bombs over the top. But 10 penalties, Tyson, for 90 yards, 2 turnovers, which were bad interceptions by their quarterback. Like that is what's different about this Alabama team than I think when we talk about the dynasty that Saban's had there. And I get what you're saying, right? Like it's like you don't go in and you see an Alabama team like, holy shit, we're done. Like it feels like, okay, we can get these guys. Like they're gettable. Like teams are sensing that there's blood in the water around the Alabama sideline and when they play them, and that just hasn't been the case in the past. And so that's interesting. Another thing I was reading, I was listening to a podcast, I forget, just somebody who is very in tune with recruiting, and they said based on the recruiting databases that this is supposed to be like the best team ever assembled for what's at Alabama because of like how many highly rated players are in. And I was thinking, you remember that old saying like in college basketball and back in the day in college football, like, oh, I committed to Alabama. He went from a 3-star to a 4-star or a 4-star to a 5-star. Like, is that the case with this Alabama team? Because you said they look a little bit slower. And so I wanted to bring that up because this is supposed to be the best of the best compiled in Alabama, like based on the recruiting data and history. I know A&M's had good classes and Georgia's had good classes recently. This is supposed to be like the best team that's ever been assembled at Alabama. And if they're still looking like this and it doesn't look great and they look slow, is there just something to the fact that maybe they're living a lot more on reputation right now than the fact that Tyson, USC may be better than them? Georgia certainly is better than them. Like we can run through it. Like, is Florida State better? I don't want to jump the shark on that one. Like Ohio State, like they haven't been in the playoff in a while, but we're just kind of looking around and it's like, is Alabama getting back to the pack a lot more than they were in the past?
Well, I think when you go 10 years, bringing in, 30, 40 kids every summer and you miss on 2, you can survive that because you're putting out so many dudes in the league. When you have these classes where last year the receivers stunk, right? I mean, they haven't had a true like dominant running back. I know it's going to sound weird, but since Najee Harris, and I know he's only been gone for a minute, but there was a time, and maybe I'm just getting old, where it was like 1 through 3 of the running backs at Alabama were going to kill you. It doesn't feel like that's the case right now. It doesn't feel like the wide receivers are going to dominate every rep. And that goes from Julio Jones all the way up. Remember, it was Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle were on the same team.
Yep.
Right? They didn't miss. And so now they've had some misses at some pretty big spots. And, when you lose guys like that over and over again to the NFL, eventually it happens to everybody that you're not going to be able to replace them at the level that they left at because, like, Will Anderson's not walking through the door, man. And, like, these aren't bad players. Like there is 170 other college teams that would love to take these transfers in. It just so happens that at the top of the top, like Georgia hasn't missed in a while either. It'll come for them, but it's not right now.
And I wonder, just put a bow on this, how does Texas respond, right? Like in a classic situation for Texas in the past few years, not even past few years, past decade plus, Texas has a big win and they blow it, right? Like this is supposed to springboard their season, and then they underperform the next couple weeks. I'm curious to see if Sarkisian and this football team can overcome that and really show that this is a Texas team that's back and they're ready to compete, because they're moving into the SEC next week. Like this game is happening next year. This game is happening every single week for this program next year. So are they prepared mentally, maturely? I'm curious to watch that from Texas going forward. But this is a huge win for them, a massive statement as they look to get into the college football playoff.
I didn't know that Texas learned to tackle. That was one of my main takeaways. Like those boys were out there hitting. I mean, there was misses for sure that led to some explosive plays, but they look ready for the SEC to me.
Miami just stomped A&M. Speaking of SEC teams, man, and so were you shocked by it? Like, let's be completely honest here. Now, this could have gone extremely wrong for Miami. Let's not kid ourselves here. Like Texas A&M got off to a great start, blocked punt, went up 7-0. They had everything going right for them. And Tyson, for the first time in a long time, Miami actually showed a little fight, like a little spirit. They said, no, this isn't happening to us on our home field. Like they normally roll up in a ball and quit and cry, and I'm just going to go hang on the beach. That was not the case this week.
Well, they were playing bigger quitters, bigger criers, bigger guys that want to get out of there. I mean, that's who Texas A&M is. We say, is Texas ready for the SEC? Has A&M been ready for the SEC? They've been here for a decade.
Well, Johnny Manziel, that was the last time.
And that's the go-to for everybody. But like Johnny never beat LSU, and so beating Alabama is awesome, right? But you didn't even beat the second best, and so at the end of the day, it's really hard to run these things off. You fire Kevin Sumlin, get his ass out of here. We need more. Jimbo has a worse record through this many games, coach. This is when Kevin Sumlin got fired. So that's kind of where we're at, man. And hats off to Miami. To me, this doesn't hold very much weight, just because I don't think A&M's a good football team. I said that in the preseason breakdown. I think we're both on their under this year. Did you play that with me?
No, I didn't. I wanted to take their over, but it was too ridiculous. I should have taken it earlier in the season, but
I just look, man. I think that Texas A&M are they the new Ole Miss?
Yeah, it feels like it. And let's be honest, Tyson. If Jimbo doesn't sign that huge contract and the boosters have to pay him out, his ass was fired last year.
Yeah, people are happy.
Like there's no way this is a healthy situation there between the athletic and then Miami Tyson. Like who I was impressed with was Tyler Van Dyke. And this was somebody who had a horrible year last year. But Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, remember when he won like coordinator of the year that one season? I mean, and he's been horrible ever since. That may have actually been what was the problem with this Miami's offense. Like Tyler Van Dyke against an SEC defense who has a ton of talent went 21 of 30 for 374 and 5 touchdowns. Like he was really good this game. Xavier Restrepo, 6 receptions, 126. Jacoby George, 5 for 94. Like, I mean, they just got behind this defense and looked legitimately like they have athletes there at Miami.
It was bombs away, man. And that, it felt like we were just a year early, maybe. Maybe that's the case. Maybe last year, all the Miami love we were giving everybody was misplaced. And we were a year early because this is kind of what we thought they were going to look like a year ago. And they didn't. They lose. They're going to find a way to lose games they shouldn't. That's just kind of where the program with Miami football is. But this is a hell of a start because the Miami team from last year would have got punched in the face, and like that punt block into a touchdown would have snowballed into probably like 49-7 or something ridiculous like that. So it was nice to see them get up off the mat and throw some punches themselves. I'm excited for them going forward. This is what, the 4th best team in the ACC, maybe, against like the 7th best team in the SEC right now. It's a slim pickings right now for the big games that we're talking
Oh,
about here. It's been rough, man.
it's been rougher early in the season, and we'll talk about week 3, but don't worry, like week 4 is around the corner, and that's going to be great. But last one here to wrap things up before we look ahead. Colorado just continues to roll, Tyson, and this was one where everything that everybody expected and said about Colorado coming in turned out to be true. The offensive line was completely bullied. The defense in spots was pushed around up front. The problem, I should say, the good thing for Colorado is they were facing Jeff Sims Jr., who may have had the worst quarterback performance in the history of college football. Like, it was so bad to watch. Like, I felt bad for him in a way. Like, I just couldn't believe that they kept running him out there. Like, he looked like a broken guy on the sideline. Like, how bad are the backups if they just kept throwing him out? Like, it was so bad.
Well,
and then ultimately, the dams broke, and Colorado just kicked their ass in the second half.
Did you see after the game when he took his mask off and it was Spencer Petras?
Oh no! Was it the Scooby-Doo thing? Is that what happened?
No, I'm just kidding. I mean, dude, we were way wrong on Colorado. They're like, Shedeur Sanders is fucking nice,
Yeah.
and it's gonna catch up to him because it will. Like, after week 1, saying that the FCS and the FBS aren't that different. Like, you're gonna have to see USC. You're gonna have to play Oregon. Like, those guys are gonna be real fired up to play you. But TCU was fired up to play him, and Nebraska was fired up to play him, and they came out and the game was close until it wasn't. And like, that's a genuine skill that this team has, is they can just kind of rack things up on you. Like, it turns into an avalanche. This offense gets things going, and it doesn't look like it should. And I think that's maybe why people are freaking out so much, is like Shedeur Sanders rolling out to his right, throws kind of like a lazy bomb that finds its way behind the secondary when, like, for some reason they're standing flat-footed instead of like trying to go to the spot, or Travis Hunter's back there somewhere and he's standing by himself. Look, dude, they beat Matt Rule and they beat the shit out of him, and it was personal, Deion said, and so that part's awesome, and I'm having a great time watching Colorado. It's really hard to actually truly gauge where this team's at. Beating Nebraska and beating TCU in week 1 after TCU loses all those pieces. We'll know more by the end of the season, but for right now, this is not only the story of the college football season, but this is the story of the year, dude. Like, social media is only Colorado football posts. It's crazy.
Oh, it's crazy. Like, they're loving it. Like, it's a party there, and they host Colorado State at 10 p.m. in freaking Boulder. And that place is going to be going nuts. And if they do that, they're going to start off 3-0. But Tyson, let's run through this real quick. Next game in week 4 at Oregon. That's a big game. Then they host USC. Those are 2 wake-up calls real quick. At Arizona State, that's a winnable game for Colorado now, for sure. Host Stanford, that's winnable. At UCLA, that could be a wake-up call. Hosting Oregon State, that's going to be a wake-up call. If they're not already woken up after Oregon, USC, and UCLA. Then they host Arizona, who just pushed around an SEC team. At Washington State, who pushed around Wisconsin. And then at Utah, who pushes around everybody. So, we're going to know a lot, like you said, at the end of the year when it comes to Colorado. But like you said, right now, this is freaking awesome. We said it. We believe in Deion. Like, we want these naysayers. Like, I think a lot of people just don't like him and are rooting for him to fail. That's not us here at I Said What I Said. Like, you can talk all the shit you want if you back it up. And right now, that's what Colorado's doing.
It's so much fun, dude. Like, all the pregame stuff all getting leaked and the postgame stuff, like, it gets you fired up, man. And look, dude, if they beat Oregon, there is no break on this train. It is full steam ahead, man.
If they beat Oregon, jeez, dude, like, social media is going to explode. Like, that's going to be
nuts. They could lose by 100 to USC, and I don't even think people would care.
Let's get into week 3, because Tyson, normally we preview the big games of the slate, everything that's going on, and just there is not a lot going on. Like, Tyson's sleeping right now just thinking about it. Like, that's what it is. Like, what's the biggest game? Honestly, Tennessee at Florida, and Florida's pretty bad. We said Colorado is playing Colorado State. Colorado State's horrible. Other than that, like, really, there's nothing. So, Tyson, instead, we wanted to kind of flip it on our side because we do both previews and gambling picks on this episode. So why don't you take the baton here and talk about what you want to talk about with this discussion?
Well, I think, like, these are some of my you look at the slate and you're like, God damn it, this is going to be brutal. Because if you're a sicko like us, you're still watching. So it doesn't really matter who's on. You're going to be flipping through the channels. But that's the entire point of weeks like this. If you are a gambler, is you don't have to, unless you're a fan of one of these teams. There's nothing that's going to be pulling you back. To like I have to be sitting in front of my TV when Washington Michigan State kicks off because I need to see the entirety of that game. You have an opportunity to watch 10, 15 teams this week that you wouldn't really get a chance to in like next week and going forward. It's going to be really hard to fit UTSA in on my regular watching schedule. But this week I got a shot, right? Are you a believer in Notre Dame? Maybe you haven't got to see him yet. You can watch a little bit of that. You can watch Michael Penix Jr. You can see if the hype is real with Drew Aller. Like there's more opportunities here. Like, is Oklahoma's defense actually better, or were the teams they played to start worse? And this isn't going to tell you a whole bunch this week, but you get a chance to, you can kind of feel the vibes a little bit because the season is taking shape and it happens really fast in college football where week 1, week 0 stuff, like if you lose in week 1, week 0, you still make the playoffs at the end of the year if you play really well. Nobody seems to care. By week 3 or 4, man, if you start losing games, you're done. Like that's it. So these guys are ready. These are huge games, and they might not seem like it, but everybody is going to be. LSU is going to try to beat Mississippi State by 100, right? And so, like, if you want to watch these ranked teams play, now is a pretty good time because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because we're 3 weeks in during this game. We got 2 under our belt. We don't have preseason for college football. So there's some notions that we had about teams coming into this. And now we'll show our gambling record here pretty soon. I was off about a lot of it. But now we'll get a better idea of what these teams actually look like, how they adjusted to the new clock, because that was a major storyline, I thought, to start the season that I think has taken place so far in this one. But yeah, Tyson, like you can bounce around to a lot of different games because, Penn State's facing Illinois at noon on Fox. Florida State's playing Boston College. Not going to gauge too much, but another opportunity to see Florida State in a conference game against Boston College. At the same time, LSU's playing a conference game at noon as well. Kansas State, Missouri. Like, what do those teams look like? These should be high flying offenses and okay defenses. Kind of moving to the second slate. South Carolina, Georgia. All right, little conference matchup there. Like Oregon State's facing a little physical San Diego State team. Like, how do they look there? And so on and so forth. Like you can bounce around, like Tyson said, and get bits and pieces of these different teams and just kind of look for your own eyes and see how these teams look as they're not playing FCS schools. They're not playing cupcakes in week 1. And so, yeah, I think this is a really good opportunity for not just bettors who I think kind of compare your power ratings or your notions of teams that you have, but also just viewers. Like who's actually good, who's actually not, and who should you pay attention to going forward if you're a casual fan.
I mean, I like looking at, like, to me, like this week, I want to watch like North Carolina play defense more than I want to watch them play offense. I want to watch some of these teams and the team speed that they have on defense because that's going to matter more to me when we get later in the season. Because at the top of college football, dude, all these offenses can score 70 points. It's who's quicker, who's faster sideline to sideline, who's hitting harder right now, who has better player, and so you get a little chance to see.
All right. Well, with that, let's get in the money-making time, Tyson, and let me bring up last week. And this is going to be a horror show, folks. So I just apologize because I've been doing bad, like just really, really bad. It has not been good for your boy Brad here so far this season. Here's the week 2 recap. I went 1-5. Now I hit Kansas. I was feeling great, Tyson. I'm like, let's go. Got Kansas in on Friday at -3. I'm feeling good. Rolling into Saturday, I lost every single game, including my play of the week, UTSA -13.5, who like was dominant the entire game and just couldn't get it home. Now, I do want to say we had 2 of our games featured on Scott Van Pelt's Bad Beats episode.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind here because Tyson, Minnesota had 3 plays from the 1-yard line and couldn't get it in to not cover that number. Stanford, USC scored 55 themselves and then quit. Auburn had a million opportunities to cover this for your play of the week and mine.
I cannot believe that.
And then Utah, Tulane, that's Utah -7.5 on the recap. I apologize, not +7.5. And Tulane +7.5. Did anybody watch that game? Like, Ole Miss was up 1 or something like that, kicked or up 7, kicked a field goal, then fumble 6. Like, I don't know what that was, but that was on bad beats. I just tried to block that out. And so Tyson and I, with the bad week, a 3-8 week combined, we went minus 5.22 units on the week, putting us up total minus 5.82. Now, good news, Tyson's carrying it. He's up 1.5 units. So Tyson's holding strong. I'm down 7.33 units, so I really got to get my stuff together as we head into week 3.
You know what, Brad? It starts now. All right, that's what the turnaround is starting now. How are we supposed to know that Utah was only going to win by 7? How are we supposed to know that Auburn can have the ball for 90 minutes in a football game and only score 10 points? Like, that team stinks, dude. That was tough.
That was hard to watch.
Flush it, man. We're moving on. And I'm going to start out here strong, Brad. I'm going for my first pick of this week. I'm going Alabama, the team we just shitted on, minus 31.5 at South Florida. And I understand 31.5, huge number. You just talked that they can't score and blah, blah, blah. Nick Saban, after losses, I don't know if you've heard, pretty good. Pretty good. It doesn't normally end very well. And they don't always cover the spread in these games, but the team is always prepared. Those 10 penalties, I expect that number to go way down. And I do think that this is a matchup here where it might not matter how accurate the quarterback is, because he might just be able to get to the sideline and run 65-yard touchdowns by himself all day. This is going to be athlete for athlete. They're going to crush. And if they were to somehow win that game against Texas last week, this is a 40-point spread. And I didn't learn anything new about Alabama. I think that this is a classic Nick Saban. We're going to win this game 58-3.
I like that pick. I really do, Tyson. Just a little foreshadow for later, potentially. I'm going to start off strong, too. I'm going LSU minus 9.5 on the road at Mississippi State. I can't believe this is the number here, folks. I really can't. Mississippi State should have lost to Arizona last week. Would they have a hard time covering Arizona or handling Arizona's offense? The mobile quarterback, Jaden Delora, was shredding them up through the air and on the ground. Well, what do you know? LSU has that. Here's the difference. LSU has actually really good players, and they're built to play in the SEC. And the only time you can really attack LSU, or where they've shown weakness so far this season, is in the secondary and with the passing attack. And when you have a mobile quarterback, you have to spy on. Mississippi State, this isn't Mike Leach's Mississippi State team. They're running at a high clip. So I don't know if they want to change their game plan for this one. Now, can they switch the game plan and then start throwing with Will Rogers, who's a very good thrower of the football? Sure. I just don't expect that to happen, especially in college football. You have your playbook and you're going to run it. So I love LSU minus 9.5 for my first play this week.
I think we're going to be swapping sides here if we're not careful as far as fandom goes. My second one here, Brad, very similar reasoning. I have North Carolina minus 7.5 at home playing Minnesota. I actually have the Minnesota over. So this might not age very well for me as far as the season long goes. But North Carolina was fighting for their life last week against App State, and they come out on top. But they haven't looked very impressive to me yet, and I'm almost hedging this, with myself, because North Carolina is good. Like I still believe in Drake May and this North Carolina team to be better than this, man. And like Minnesota comes out and opens the season, doesn't look good against a Nebraska team who has really only looked good against Minnesota. I just think this is a get right spot for North Carolina, kind of a reset. Maybe even if they win by 10, it's not pretty. I'm covering, and I expect it to be bigger than that.
Well, I'm going to stay in the same game. I'm going to go Minnesota and North Carolina over 49.5. So we saw North Carolina's defense against South Carolina look good, right? Like, so, okay, this is a new improved team. And then they looked like complete trash against App State. So, maybe a little Jekyll and Hyde here. I don't know if I'm getting Jekyll or Hyde. So
which one's the
my
one you
thing
want?
is, I don't know. Well, I guess I want the bad one here, because I think North Carolina's offense is going to score a ton on Minnesota, who hasn't had to face like anything aerial. Like you're facing Jeff Sims Jr. and an Eastern Michigan team last week. Like that's not the second overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. So I think North Carolina is going to be able to air this thing out, get their athletes in space, and run all over a Minnesota team. And then if I get a bad defensive performance from North Carolina, well, that's just cherry on top, baby. Like that's what we need. So I like the over here. Over 49.5. I think North Carolina has a shot to at least get close to this number. And if they have a bad defense, then this thing's going to get home easily.
And for the next one here, Brad, I'm going back to the well. I'm going with the Washington Huskies, man, to cover 16.5 against whatever the hell's going on in East Lansing and Michigan State. There's two ways this can go, and we talked about it a little bit pre-show. Like, if you don't know the Mel Tucker stuff going on, then like Google it, because we're not going to get into whatever he was doing. He will not be coaching them this week. It doesn't sound like he's going to be coaching them going forward. Like, is D'Antonio coming back? That's a whole other discussion here. But Washington scores the shit out of the ball. I think if Michigan State is like ridiculously fired up and they come out guns blazing, galvanize the locker room, all that stuff that is somewhat common with these sorts of things, they still aren't good enough to win the game. And from what I've seen from Michigan State over the last 2 years, I don't know if that mentality is going to like ferment and come to fruition here for this game. I just like Michael Penix Jr. is going to have 700 yards. Washington's going to score a ton of points, dude. And like Michigan State cannot keep up. They just will not be able to.
Duke minus 18.5 for my next pick here. This number to me is crazy. Like they're hosting a Northwestern team that was embarrassed by a Rutgers offense early in the first half. They played a UTEP team at home and stomped them. UTEP is awful. Like they're just a really bad team who basically quit in the second half of that game. And you're telling me that a Duke team who physically pushed around Clemson cannot beat this atrocious Northwestern offense by more than 3 touchdowns at home? I don't buy it. Give me minus 18.5 for the Duke Blue Devils, who are going to body this bad Northwestern team.
Damn, we're staying right along Tobacco Road. This is nice. My next one is my play of the week. So you want me to save that? I think you have a couple extra before we get there.
I do. Yeah, do you want me to jump into mine then?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I'll stay. You know what? I'll stay in the South because I got Kentucky as my next one, Tyson. Minus 25.5 against Akron. This is mainly just to do with the level of athlete that I think is a difference maker here for Kentucky and versus what Akron's thrown out. We know the history of the MAC. It's not good when they play outside of conference. And I don't think that's going to be different in this one. Kentucky has a really good defense under Mark Stoops. Like really good. And this is not a very good Akron team. And I don't expect them to put up a lot of points. And on the flip side, they have a really good quarterback on their end. Kentucky does. And Devin Leary, like someone who's been able to put up points for this team. So I like Kentucky. I think they're going to put a route on Akron. It's mainly due to the fact that they can constrict the offense that Akron's going to throw at them. And I think they're going to get more opportunities for their offense to cover this number.
I don't know if you know this, but you are picking all my season-long plays for wins this week, which is nice. Yeah, except for with your track record last week. I don't know if I want that.
That's what I was going to say. I don't know. Now I'm nervous. It's either going to be a good thing or a bad thing for both of us. And then last one here for me, Tyson, before we get into our plays of the week. I got Arizona minus 17.5 at home against the aforementioned UTEP Miners. Like this could go a couple ways here. UTEP was embarrassed. They're like, oh, okay, we're going to try harder. And Arizona's like, man, that was a tough loss. Like, but the thing is, the talent level is just so different. Like, I just can't reiterate this enough. Northwestern stomped UTEP. UTEP has to go back on the road again and face a much different looking level of athlete in Arizona. Like, they have fast players. Jed Fish has done a good job of getting legitimate athletes in there. And Jaden Delora is a good quarterback. And Ben Bryant shredded him up last week. UTEP, that is. I think Arizona can do it this week. I think this is extremely, extremely light for what we're getting here in this matchup. And it's a late game at 11 p.m. Eastern. I don't think a lot of people have even looked at this one. I would be shocked if this thing didn't move by the time it kicked in our favor. So definitely get this in at 17.5. Let's go Wildcats.
So this is the first year that UTEP's mascot and team name has actually made sense, because you don't have to be 18 years old to be able to start for this football team, dude. Like, it's Miners with an O. They're bad. Like, bottom of the barrel. Maybe they're worse than that joke was. My play of the week here, Brad. I'm going Penn State team total over 31.5. Illinois, who's stopping Drew Aller? Like, how is that secondary going to contain what they're doing? And the flip side, and you can speak to this a little bit better than I can, like Penn State still seems to be somewhat kind of finding their footing, and maybe they're just trying to play the hot hand when it comes to the running back and the running game to this point in the year. They got 3 dudes that might be able to put up 100 yards on the ground against this Illinois defense. They're going to be able to do pretty much whatever they want on that side of the ball, I think. I was leaning towards the spread because I do think that 14.5 isn't quite enough respect for Penn State at this point. But, dude, this offense is good. And I think that we're just a little slow to wake up because if Ohio State had, the moments that Penn State's had on offense so far this year, I think that team total is probably closer to 38.
Kansas absolutely shredded up that Illinois defense last week. And this is a defense in Illinois that led the country in takeaways in interceptions last year. We're really good in the secondary, but they lost 3 players in the NFL draft, and it has not been the same. So Penn State, if they want to attack, they got to do it through the air. But at the same time, Illinois has been leaky on the ground as well. Like, This is just not the same unit that was last year. And they lost their defensive coordinator to Purdue's head coaching position, lost a lot of guys to the NFL. Like, Penn State should be able to move the ball here. So my only concern is, Tyson, the lack of possessions that potentially could come if Penn State can't stop Illinois' run game. But on the flip side, Drew Aller, the quarterback for Penn State, has shown the ability to be explosive through the air. And this running game is just waiting to explode since it's kind of been stymied a little bit. So we could see some explosives for Penn State that gets you over this number. Yeah, I get you there. Believe me, as a Penn State alumni wearing a hat. My play of the week, Tyson, I said I liked your first play. I love Alabama to bounce back, minus 31.5. Over South Florida. Now, I know they got to go on the road, but this is not a very good South Florida team. I heard a nugget, too. The coach of South Florida was, I believe, the offensive coordinator for Tennessee last year. But Nick Saban is like, just, I want to beat this guy. And just, he's got some red ass going after getting embarrassed at home against Texas. Like, he's looking to take his anger out on somebody. And this would be one of those classic games that Alabama's like, oh, you guys forgot we were Alabama. We're going to score 100 points and just embarrass a low-level team and just show you why we're Alabama.
So I could only find these numbers. I don't know if there's like more current ones out there. I didn't look too hard. But this is just from 2019. These are the Nick Saban, like after they lose, this is what happens. 2019 lost to LSU, beat that good Michigan State team, beat them 38-7. Lost against Auburn, beat a good Michigan team 35-16. Lose against Auburn, bodied Clemson. Lost against Ole Miss in 2015, beat UL Monroe 34-0. Like, they beat Western Carolina 49-0 after losing to A&M in 2012. It's weird you have to go back 10, 11 years to get these Nick Saban numbers, but that's who the Alabama program is. There's nothing that South Florida can present Alabama that they're not going to be ready for.
Yeah, no, let's go Bama. Come on, baby. Let's get the wheels going and let's get this offense ripping. No, you can't. You're an OSU fan. Yeah. I mean, that's like me saying OSU, but the actual
saying what?
I can't do it.
Oh,
I can't say it unless I'm talking bad about them. But Tyson, there's a game Thursday night. That's Navy Memphis. There's a game Friday night that we can bet on as well. Virginia at Maryland. I currently don't have any plays on those right now. I will say I'm looking at Maryland. They're minus 15.5. I think it may get down under that number, which I'd be interested in playing Maryland, but I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. But if I do, where can they find those picks?
They will be in the Chalkboard app. It is an app in the App Store, Google Play, wherever you download your apps. The group name is ISWIS, presents the Roundtable Bets. It's this little community that we've built up, and it's conversation alongside of picks that you're playing. And we had a bad week last week. It wasn't great, but we're bouncing back. That's what we do here. And it's not only football plays, it's a whole bunch of really whatever sport you're thinking. I mentioned last time basketball is about back, so we're going to get into that and all that good stuff. But we are off the schneid on our primetime player prop picks for the NFL. We're going to try to get that back up to the bankroll that we had on it last year, and those are just fun, and it's accessible for everyone because like the way we do it is it's just a simple, very small. It's a $10 bet, so $5 for each of us. We try to roll that over as many times as we can. You don't have to play it if you don't want to, but it sure is fun. You can start with $5, and then if we can pull off what we did last year, you'll be sitting at looking at 500 by the end of the season, and that's a good place to be. And that is in the Chalkboard app, and that's the only place those are posted before the game starts. So that's where you're going to be looking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Like, subscribe, and share in the meantime. Like I said off the top, share this freaking podcast, because if we have 150 subscribers, the 150th person is getting $50 to Amazon.
Talk to your buddy. Tell them about this deal. And then when they subscribe at 150 and we send them the gift card, you guys can split it. How's that?
There you go. There you go. Figure it out. Figure things out. You guys are smart out there. Come on. But subscribe. I mean, not only do that, but subscribe so you don't miss anything that we have going on, because we have a ton of content that we're laying out throughout the season. Like we're doing NFL stuff. We're, like Tyson said, we're going to have basketball stuff around the corner. Like, I can't believe that's already coming, but it is. And then if you like the show, it really does help us out, and we do appreciate it. Like, it helps us become more discoverable on YouTube. If you rate, if you comment, and you give us like 5 stars in podcasts, if it's Spotify or Apple, like that helps us climb up the charts and helps other people find us as well. So we're much appreciative of those who do watch and do listen and do help us out. We really do appreciate it. And you can stay connected with us on social media, X, Instagram, TikTok. It's all the same at ISWIS_pod. So that's going to do it for our college football episode this week. We're hoping for much better results on the gambling front, but we'll be back later to preview the NFL games and a big NFL slate heading into week 2 of that season. So if you're an NFL fan as well, we got you covered on that front. We will talk to you guys then. Peace.